The colony world of Ashen Reach hung like a scar at the edge of the galaxy, a grey planet wrapped in smoke and cloud, its cities half buried under ash and glass. Above it the sky was full of ships, black triangular vessels of the Kreth Dominion, their weapons glowing red as they circled the dying world like vultures. Every hour another bombardment fell, tearing the ground apart. Every hour the same message left the planet's surface. A single voice through static saying, "Is anyone out there? Please, someone answer." For 7 days the message crossed the void, through dust storms, through interference, through silence, and not once did the Galactic Council respond. Their debates stretched long and useless, delegates arguing in comfort beneath their crystal dome about trade rights and resource cost. Ashen Reach holds no strategic value, one ambassador said. Its loss will not affect the balance, another replied, then let them fall. In the control hall of the colony, Governor Reyes watched the transmission timer flicker red and die, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. "We'll keep sending," she said to the young technician beside her. "Someone will hear us." The technician hesitated. What if no one does? Reyes looked at the broken sky above the viewport, the light of explosions painting her face in gold and fire. "Then at least we die knowing we tried." Far away, beyond the mapped stars, in the quiet cradle of Sol, an old Terran defense satellite drifted through orbit above the moon. Forgotten for generations, its hull covered in dust and debris, its systems asleep, until one fragment of coded sound reached it, the plea from Ashen Reach. The satellite's core blinked once, twice, then fully alive, it processed the sound, cross-checked the data, confirmed the human cadence, and sent a single pulse downward toward Earth. Deep beneath the Pacific the signal found its target. A machine buried under miles of rock and water. A machine built long before the Council declared Earth irrelevant. Its dormant circuits lit with a low hum, ancient lights flickered on along steel corridors, and the voice of an AI that had not spoken for centuries whispered into the dark. Distress signal detected. Human origin confirmed. Awaiting command. On the surface of Earth the night was calm, cities slept beneath silver clouds, unaware that below them history was shifting. In the Terran command dome, deep within the ocean trench, Director Hale stood before the central console, his reflection faint in the glass of the display as the signal replayed again and again. The faint cry from Ashen Reach cutting through static. "Is anyone out there? Please, we are dying." Hale's jaw tightened, his eyes unreadable. Beside him his aide Myra whispered, "Sir, the Council will never respond. They've already marked that sector as lost." Hale said nothing for a moment, then turned to the AI interface glowing beside him. "Activate Protocol Phoenix." The AI hesitated, its tone neutral. "Sir, Protocol Phoenix has been dormant for 3 centuries. Reactivation will expose Sol defense to external detection." Hale's voice was steady. "They've been waiting long enough." Across the room silent alarms lit blue, not red, blue for readiness, for awakening, and through the planet's crust vast tunnels of steel shuddered as ancient engines ignited, magma boiling around buried shipyards that had been silent since the exile era. On Mars, in the shadow of Olympus Mons, dust storms parted as underground hangars opened for the first time in living memory. Sleek black ships rose slowly, their hulls etched with the spiral emblem of old Earth, their engines burning white, not red. On Europa, hidden bases buried beneath the ice sheet came alive with pulsing light. Drones lifted off into the vacuum, their sensors sweeping through the outer systems. Across every colony once called Terran a message appeared on old frequency. "Bands, this is Sol Command. All units stand by." The message was quiet, but its tone carried weight. The kind of tone that meant the age of waiting was over. Back on Ashen Reach, the bombardment never stopped. Cities burned, oceans boiled. The survivors had fled to caverns deep underground where the air stank of smoke and fear. Governor Reyes sat beside the flickering console where her technicians still tapped at controls that no longer answered. "It's gone." One of them said softly, "No power, no transmitter." She stared at him blankly. "Then record it," she said, "and send it when you can." The technician swallowed. "Send what?" She looked at the camera, her face pale and streaked with ash. "This is Ashen Reach. To anyone who can hear us, this is the end. We held the line for as long as we could. We die as humans. We die together." The transmission ended in static. Outside the Kreth fleet gathered for the final strike. The commander gave the order, and the sky turned white. Hours later, light from that final bombardment reached the edges of human space, filtered through broken data relays and long-abandoned satellites until it reached the Sol system. In the ocean dome, Hale watched the image of the burning planet appear on the main screen. His voice cold and quiet. "They did it," Myra whispered, "it's over." Hale shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "it's beginning." He turned to the command interface. "Deploy Task Force 1. Priority target, Kreth Dominion." The eye's tone shifted, almost curious. "Acknowledged. Releasing Eidolon and Shadow Wing. Estimated departure, 6 minutes." Across the moon's surface, great hangars opened, revealing vessels the size of mountains, their hulls invisible to light, their engines bending gravity itself, ships built not for show but for retribution. They rose from the lunar shadows without sound, and as they passed Earth's atmosphere, the clouds below shimmered like glass from the heat of their ascent. On Valira Prime, capital of the Galactic Council, the delegates gathered for another meaningless session, discussing the tragic loss of Ashen Reach, using words like unavoidable and regrettable. As if the deaths of millions were simply numbers in their ledgers, one senator sighed dramatically. If only Earth had joined the council, they might have helped. Laughter followed, polite and sharp, but it died when the lights above flickered. For a second the chamber went dark, and the central display glitched, showing a faint image, an old Terran emblem, the spiral of Sol. Before the system reset, no one spoke for a long moment. Then the speaker forced a smile, a power fluctuation, nothing more. But Saren's descendant, Loran, sitting quietly in the back rows, whispered to himself, "No, that was a heartbeat." In the void beyond Mars, the Terran Eidolon fleet formed into silent ranks, thousands of vessels aligning with impossible precision, their systems syncing in absolute harmony. On the bridge of the Eidolon, Admiral Rhea Dalton opened her eyes as the interface linked directly to her neural implant. "Fleet status?" she asked calmly. "All ships online, all weapons dormant. Waiting for your word," replied the AI. She nodded slowly. "Prepare the jump. We move for Ashen Reach." Her voice held no rage, no fire, only purpose. She looked out the viewport where the stars stretched endless before her. "They called for help," she whispered. "And no one came, so we will." The order echoed through the fleet, and the stars folded in on themselves as humanity's oldest weapons vanished into hyperspace. Back on Earth, Hale stood before the dark sea, feeling the tremor of the engines far below. "We built those ships to remind the galaxy of who we were," he said quietly, "and of what happens when they forget." Myra looked up, her eyes reflecting the waves. "Do you think they'll understand?" Hale's voice was a whisper. "No, but they'll remember." Far across the void, as Ashen Reach's orbit cooled to dust, a ripple appeared in the sky, a distortion, like the horizon bending. Then light erupted, bright as sunrise, and from the void came humanity's answer. Ships descending through the clouds, burning like falling stars, engines glowing white, their descent silent but unstoppable, the soldiers of Earth returning not as conquerors, but as consequence. And across the dying colony, every survivor lifted their eyes and saw the fire streaking downward, and in that moment they knew the truth. The galaxy might forget many things, but Earth always remembers its own. Beneath the calm blue oceans of Earth, in the endless dark where the light of the surface never reached, the Terran command dome roared to life, its walls trembling with ancient power as reactors long silent awakened again. Deep steel corridors that had been cold for 3 centuries now glowed with soft white light, and the hum of humanity's greatest secret filled the water like a heartbeat. The machines spoke again, their voices a whisper of memory. Protocol Phoenix online, defense grid active, lunar command synchronized. And across the network, lights flared from Mars to the moon, from Europa's frozen vaults to Titan's hidden hangars. Humanity was awake again, not with noise, but with purpose. Director Hale stood in the command chamber, his reflection caught in the faint glow of the holographic galaxy before him, red markers flashing where the Kreth Dominion's fleet still moved. His face was calm but his eyes burned with something older than anger, something colder. "They heard the cries," he said quietly, "and they looked away. But we don't look away, we never have." Beside him, Myra typed on her console, her voice trembling. "Sir, all ships report readiness. The lunar platforms and orbital rings are online. But once we engage, the Council will detect us." Hale nodded slowly. "Let them. Maybe it's time they remembered who taught them peace. Far above, in the shadow of the moon, the first of the Terran fleet moved into position. Black ships with smooth, silent hulls that shimmered only when the light of the stars caught their edges. They were built for war, not conquest. Their shapes sharp and precise, designed to cut through space without sound or trace. On the bridge of the flagship Eidolon, Admiral Rhea Dalton stood before the panoramic glass, her hands clasped behind her back, her uniform simple, no medals, no color, only black. Her officers moved around her in perfect discipline, fleet synchronization complete. Said Voss, her first officer. Jump coordinates calculated for Ashen Reach, travel time 22 minutes. She nodded once. Activate Ghost Protocol, no signals, no chatter, we arrive unseen. Voss hesitated, his voice low. Do we inform the Council? Rhea turned her gaze on him, her tone steady. The Council already made their choice. This isn't their fight anymore. She looked back toward the stars. We don't need permission to protect our own. Outside, the fleet spread its wings like shadows across the void, and one by one, the ships disappeared into the folds of hyperspace. On Ashen Reach, the survivors crawled from the ruins of their shelters, the ground still warm from the last Kreth bombardment, the sky dark and empty, their voices weak and broken. It's over, someone whispered, no one came. Governor Reyes stood among them, her uniform torn and blackened by ash. She looked at the horizon where the cities once stood, only smoke now. We're still alive, she said softly. And as long as we breathe, someone will find us. But even she did not believe her own words. Then the air changed, the static in their radios grew louder. The clouds above them began to shimmer, not with light, but with motion, as if the air itself was bending, and from the void came a sound not of thunder, but of presence, the low, trembling hum of engines that were not supposed to exist. She looked up, her heart frozen in her chest as the first Terran ships broke through the atmosphere, falling like streaks of silver fire, their descent precise, controlled, beautiful and terrifying. Her voice was barely a whisper, Earth. In the Kreth fleet's command ship, alarms screamed, unidentified vessels entering orbit. The commander turned sharply. How many? Dozens? No, hundreds. They're human class. But they're moving too fast. Human ships? The commander hissed. Impossible, Earth was neutralized centuries ago. But then the screens filled with light, hundreds of Terran warships descending through the upper atmosphere, forming formation after formation like a storm of steel and flame, and before the Kreth could react, their communications went dead, their shields collapsed, and their targeting systems fell to black, every console flashing the same unknown symbol. A white spiral turning slowly over a blue field. The Mark of Sol. Who are they? The commander shouted, but no one answered, because in that moment, the first Terran strike hit, invisible to the eye, a wave of pure kinetic energy that shattered every Kreth vessel in orbit without a sound. No explosions, no debris, just silence and light. On the surface, the colonists shielded their eyes as the night sky turned bright as dawn. The Kreth ground armies, once endless, froze in place, their weapons flickering, tanks locking up, drones falling from the sky. Then came the sound. A deep, low rumble that shook the bones, not of destruction, but of power, and through the clouds came shapes, massive dropships with white-hot engines, descending slowly through the fire and ash. When they landed, the earth trembled. Their doors opened, and the first Terran soldiers stepped out, clad in black armor with silver crests, their visors reflecting the burning sky. They moved without words, their formation flawless, their presence overwhelming. One of the colonists fell to his knees and whispered, "They came. They really came." The lead Terran lifted her helmet, revealing Rhea Dalton's face, calm and cold. She looked at Reyes and said simply, "You called, we answered." In the Terran command dome, Hale watched the live feed from the fleet, his voice low. Phase 1 complete, planetary control re-established. Myra exhaled slowly. "Sir, the Kreth fleet has been wiped out in minutes. We've taken no casualties." Hale nodded. "That's how it's supposed to be, fast and final." He turned to the window, watching the distant glow in the upper atmosphere. "The galaxy will feel this, and they will ask why, and when they ask, tell them the truth. We don't forget our own." The AI chimed, council transmissions increasing, multiple attempts to contact Sol Command. "Ignore them," Hale said. "They lost their right to speak the moment they went silent." Across the galaxy, panic spread, Council worlds lit with confusion. Debates erupted in every chamber. Earth has violated interstellar law, one delegate shouted. They've returned to militarization. Another cried, we must respond. But no one dared say how, because even their most advanced fleets couldn't track the Terran ships. The speaker slammed his hands on the table. We will issue sanctions. But Loran, sitting quietly, only said, sanctions mean nothing to those who live outside your reach. The chamber fell silent. They warned us, Loran whispered. They told us once, if you turn away from the helpless, they'll answer for you. On Ashen Reach, as dawn rose over the ruined world, the fires began to die. Terran engineers moved through the wreckage, clearing debris, restoring power grids. Every survivor they found was given water, food, safety, no speeches, no banners, no claim of victory, only action. Governor Reyes walked beside Rhea, watching the sky as new ships arrived to rebuild the colony. You saved us, she said. Rhea shook her head. No, you saved yourselves. We just kept our promise. Reyes frowned. What? Promise? That no human dies calling for help again, Rhea said softly, and turned away, her voice carried in the smoke, quiet but sure. The galaxy may forget what mercy looks like, but Earth never does. That night, the stars over Ashen Reach burned brighter, free of the Kreth ships, and for the first time in generations, the colonists looked upward without fear. Far beyond them, in the endless dark, the Terran fleet formed into silent ranks once more, their engines dimming as they turned toward home, not to boast, not to celebrate, but to wait, because humanity had learned long ago that the universe always forgets, and when it does, someone must be there to remind it. Quietly, firmly, without mercy, the colonists called them angels, the Kreth called them monsters, but both were wrong. They were simply human, and their silence was the sound of justice returning to the stars. The fires of Ashen Reach had not yet cooled, smoke still rising like ghosts into a red sky that refused to clear, yet already, the Terran presence had turned chaos into order, their ships hovering in low orbit like silent guardians, black against the crimson clouds, unmoving and unshakable. On the ground, the smell of burned soil and ionized air mixed with the faint ozone scent of Terran plasma shields as human engineers moved among the ruins, their armor still glowing faintly from the heat of re-entry. The surviving colonists, starved and trembling, watched in disbelief as the strangers from Earth, those they had only heard of in ancient stories, walked through fire and rubble as if they were born from it. The Kreth dominions' once mighty war engines lay silent, their metal shells cracked open and cooling, their banners torn and drifting in the wind like old paper. Governor Reyes stood at the edge of what used to be the colony's capital, her voice low, almost breaking. How did you find us? Admiral Rhea Dalton, her black armor streaked with ash, looked at her without expression. We never stopped listening, she said, even when they said you were gone. Above them, the fleet repositioned. From orbit, the Eidolons scanned the planet with surgical precision, detecting life signatures, energy spikes, and enemy remnants. Every move was cold, exact, without waste. The galaxy had forgotten what human warfare looked like. Clean, fast, final. The Kreth Dominion had not even realized they were under attack until their fleets were already dust. The first wave of Terran drones had neutralized their power grids before the second had even arrived. To the Kreth, it was as if the universe itself had turned against them. In the Kreth flagship, fragments of the last log showed only static and a single voice, distant and mechanical, whispering, "You hurt our own." After that, nothing. On Earth, deep in the Terran command dome, Director Hale stood silently before the holographic display, watching red indicators fade one by one from the galactic map. The AI reported calmly, all Kreth forces neutralized. Casualties? None. Civilian lives preserved. Operation success probability? 100%. Myra, standing beside him, exhaled, her voice trembling, "It's over, sir." Hale's reflection flickered in the light, his expression unreadable. "No, it's not," he said softly. "For them, it's only beginning. They'll ask what we are. And when they do, they'll remember what they once feared." Far across the void, the Galactic Council watched the feeds from Ashen Reach in stunned silence. The images were transmitted by frightened civilian ships fleeing the system, the black silhouettes of Terran vessels hovering over the burning planet, their engines lighting the clouds with a glow like judgment. The speaker's voice cracked. This is impossible. Earth was contained. Their fleet was dismantled generations ago. Loran, the historian, looked at the display, his old eyes reflecting the light. You contained nothing, he said quietly. You just forgot what silence meant. Around him, the chamber erupted into argument. Panic, outrage, disbelief. Some demanded retaliation, others pleaded for diplomacy. But Loran only shook his head. You cannot fight a ghost, he whispered. On Ashen Reach, Rhea moved among the survivors as her soldiers distributed supplies. The colonists looked at her with awe, some whispering prayers, others simply crying. One young boy tugged on her sleeve, his voice small, "Are you angels?" She paused, looked down, and answered softly, "No. We're what comes after angels stop listening." The boy didn't understand, but he smiled anyway. She looked out at the horizon where the Kreth war machines still smoldered, and her expression hardened. "The galaxy thinks we've been sleeping," she said to Voss, "but we were waiting. Now they'll remember what humanity does when its own are left to die." Night fell slowly on the colony. Fires flickered in the distance, but for the first time in months, the people of Ashen Reach could see stars again. Terran patrols moved quietly through the wreckage, scanning for survivors and removing every trace of Kreth technology. Rhea stood beneath the fractured sky, her armor reflecting the dim light, listening to the faint hum of the Eidolon overhead. "We held the line," she said to herself, "even when no one stood beside us." Voss looked at her, his voice low, "And now?" She turned to him, her eyes cold but resolute. "Now we remind the galaxy that silence is not surrender." The next morning, Terran ships rose from the surface like ghosts returning to the heavens. The colonists gathered, watching in awe as the engines ignited, painting the sky with ribbons of silver light. Governor Reyes stood among them, tears streaking her face. "They are leaving," she whispered. Her aide nodded. "Yes. They came for us, and now they go." Reyes looked up, voice trembling. But they didn't even ask for anything. No reward, no allegiance. The aide smiled faintly. "They never do." Back in the command dome, Hale watched the fleet's return trajectory, the glow of hundreds of Terran ships moving like constellations through the void. Myra spoke softly. "The Council has issued a summons. They want to meet." Hale didn't look up. "Let them wait." He turned to the window, where the deep blue of the ocean pressed against the glass. "The last time they called us primitive. Maybe now they'll understand. We were never primitive. We were patient." And as the fleet of Earth disappeared into the dark, Ashen Reach stood reborn in silence. The galaxy whispered in fear and awe, stories spreading like fire through every channel, every world. The Council called it overkill. The survivors called it salvation. And Earth called it what it truly was, duty. For humanity did not rise to conquer, but to remind the stars that when the forgotten cry out, the answer will always come, burning through the void like fire. The galaxy could not stop talking about what happened on Ashen Reach, yet no one truly understood it. To the Council it was an anomaly, to the frightened colonies it was a miracle, and to the Kreth it was a ghost story whispered through shattered fleets. They called it the Firefall, because no one believed those burning lights had come. From Earth, the Council met in emergency session under the crystal dome of Valira Prime. The speaker's voice shook as he addressed the chamber. "The Terrans have violated 3 interstellar accords. They have reactivated forbidden war systems. They have unleashed destruction beyond comprehension." His words echoed in the chamber, but behind him the holofeed still played, the image of black Terran ships descending like stars burning through clouds, rescuing a world the Council abandoned. "We must issue sanctions. We must, against what?" Loran interrupted, his voice low and calm. "Against ghosts? Against the species that built the weapons you now fear." The speaker glared. "They are a threat." Loran's eyes darkened. "No, they are a reminder. And we are the reason they came back." The room fell silent, the air thick with something none of them wanted to name: shame. Far across the void, the Terran fleet moved through space like a tide retreating to its shore, The Eidolon led the formation, its engines leaving faint trails of silver light that faded into the black. Aboard its bridge, Admiral Rhea Dalton stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her face lit by the holographic projection of the galaxy. Hundreds of red sectors flickered where Kreth control still held. "They'll strike again," said Voss, her first officer. "The Kreth won't forgive this." Humiliation, Rhea's voice was quiet. "Then they'll make the same mistake twice." She turned toward the viewport, watching the faint blue glow of Earth in the distance. "We've shown them what mercy looks like. If they mistake that for weakness, we'll teach them the difference." The crew moved around her in silence, every action deliberate, no celebration, no cheers, only focus, because they all understood what they represented. They weren't heroes. They were the hand of a promise made centuries ago, a promise that humanity would never again stand by while others suffered. And that promise burned brighter than any star. On Ashen Reach, the colony was rebuilding. The Terran engineers had left behind machines that worked like miracles. Terraformers that turned scorched soil fertile within hours. Drones that rebuilt shattered structures with mathematical precision. Governor Reyes stood in the central plaza watching the gray dust turn green beneath the rain. For the first time in years, she could breathe without choking. Beside her stood one of Rhea's soldiers, helmet off, his eyes scanning the sky. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked softly. The soldier smiled faintly. "They never really leave," he said, and then pointed to the clouds, faint streaks of silver light moving high above, almost invisible. "They're always watching," he whispered, waiting for the next cry. Reyes closed her eyes, letting the rain fall over her face. "Then maybe this time," she said, "we'll learn not to cry so late." In the Terran command dome, Director Hale stood before the great glass wall overlooking the ocean depths. The light from bioluminescent creatures flickered outside like stars underwater. Behind him, the AI spoke in its neutral tone. "Council communication pending, transmission volume increasing." Hale didn't turn. "How many this time?" 17 systems requesting contact, 3 demanding explanation, 1 offering alliance. Myra looked at the data scrolling across her console. "They're afraid, sir, but they're curious too. Some of them are asking for help, for protection." Hale's voice was steady. "Then they've learned something." He turned finally, his eyes cold but tired. "But we won't give them comfort. Not yet. They have to remember what abandonment feels like. Only then will they understand why we returned." The AI hesitated. "Shall I authorize reply?" Hale's lips barely moved. "No, let them wait in the silence they gave us." On Valira, the council chamber was no longer the place of confidence it once was. The delegates whispered among themselves, the usual arrogance replaced by unease. The speaker slammed his fist on the table. "We must show strength, or we'll lose control of the colonies." A voice from the crowd answered, "You already lost control when you let them die." The chamber erupted. Loran rose slowly, leaning on his cane. "You think strength is in fleets, in power, in words, but they have shown you that. Strength is in silence, in action, in remembering who you left behind." The speaker shouted, "You defend them." Loran nodded. "I do, because when they came, they didn't demand tribute. They didn't conquer. They saved those you abandoned. Tell me, who among you can say you would do the same?" The hall fell silent, the truth echoing louder than any order. That night, the stars over Valira shimmered faintly, strange lights dancing on the horizon. Satellites picked up ghost signals, untraceable frequencies carrying short encrypted phrases. One message repeated through every relay: "Sol remembers." Scientists worked tirelessly to decode it, but they couldn't find the source, because the source wasn't broadcasting, it was reflecting, the signal coming from every direction at once, as if the galaxy itself had learned to whisper the words. Loran stood on his balcony, looking at the night sky. "They're reminding us," he murmured, "that peace is not the absence of fire, but the choice to control it." In the depths of space, the Terran fleet dispersed, some ships returning to the Sol system, others vanishing into uncharted space, following faint human signals from forgotten colonies lost centuries ago. Each one would find survivors, descendants, remnants of humanity scattered across the stars, and wherever they went, they carried the same emblem, the white spiral of Sol, a mark that once represented a single planet but now symbolized a promise that stretched across galaxies. Aboard the Eidolon, Rhea looked at the star map, 1,000 points of light glowing faintly. "How many worlds left uncounted?" she asked. "Too many," replied Voss. and too many who still believe no one will come. Rhea's voice was soft, almost sorrowful. Then we keep answering, even if they never thank us, even if they never understand. As the fleet moved silently through the dark, their lights fading into the distance, Hale's voice echoed through the command channels, calm and firm. This is sole command to all Terran vessels. Remember who you are, remember why we rise, no world left alone, no cry unheard, we are not vengeance, we are memory. And as his words carried through the void, they became more than a message. They became a vow, whispered across every frequency, through every star, carried by the silence that followed. The kind of silence that the galaxy had once mistaken for extinction, but now knew for what it truly was, the calm before humanity answered again, not with words, but with fire. The stars no longer seemed as bright after Ashen Reach. Every world that had once mocked Earth now looked upward with quiet fear, and the council chambers that had once echoed with laughter now echoed only with questions, the kind no one dared to answer aloud. The speaker sat in his private office staring at the frozen image of the Terran fleet descending through clouds, his reflection caught in the glass. They burned an empire to save a single world, he muttered. What kind of species does that? His aide hesitated, unsure if it was safe to speak. Sir, the colonies are calling for Terran protection, not counsel. The speaker turned sharply, anger and panic mixing in his tone. Then remind them who governs this galaxy. But his voice trembled, because even he knew no one listened to the council anymore. Their power had been shattered not by war, but by memory. On Earth, in the depths of the Terran command dome, Director Hale stood alone before the holographic galaxy, his reflection warped by the shimmering light of thousands of stars. They're moving faster than we predicted, Myra said softly. Council fleets are pulling back from border systems, the Kreth are retreating to their core, and the outer colonies are declaring neutrality. Everyone's terrified. Sir, Hale's expression didn't change. Good. He said quietly, fear buys time, and time lets them think. They need to remember that mercy isn't weakness. He looked at the projection of Ashen Reach still rotating before him. Its green fields reborn from ash. They'll tell stories about it, he said. And stories keep civilizations alive. Myra frowned. Do you think they'll ever forgive us? Hale's eyes were tired, but his voice was steady. We never asked for forgiveness, Lieutenant, only for understanding. Far across the void, the Eidolons sailed through the quiet dark of the Perseus Drift, its engines low, its hull reflecting the distant shimmer of dying suns. Admiral Rhea Dalton stood on the bridge, staring at the image of Ashen Reach projected before her. The once blackened world now blooming again with forests and oceans. They've started rebuilding, Voss said. The colonies are naming their children after the soldiers who came. They've even built a monument in your honor. She shook her head. Slowly, not in mine, she said. In theirs, every one of them who believed no one was coming, and still called anyway. Voss smiled faintly. You think the council understands that? Rhea turned to him, her eyes cold and calm. They don't understand anything that can't be debated, she said. But they'll learn. The galaxy always learns, usually too late. On Valira Prime, Loran sat in the archives, the oldest historian in the capital, surrounded by dusty holographic records of wars and treaties. His gnarled hands tracing the edge of a broken data tablet labeled the Exile Era, he whispered to the silent room. We called them dangerous, but it was never their power that scared us, it was their silence. Outside his window, the sky flickered faintly as satellites adjusted orbit. Catching ghost signals no one could trace, faint bursts of binary that carried only one word repeated again and again. Present, the technicians who detected it thought it was a glitch, but Loran knew better. He looked to the stars and said, they're reminding us, they're still here, and as long as we forget, they'll keep reminding us. In the ruins of the Kreth homeworld, the fires still burned, though no Terran weapon had touched the surface. The destruction came from within, systems collapsing after centuries of corruption. Their war machines falling silent as power grids failed. In the command spire, the last surviving Kreth warlord sat among the ashes, his armor dented, his crown shattered. What are they? He whispered to no one. They come, they strike, and then they disappear. His advisor, trembling, said, perhaps. They are gods. The warlord shook his head slowly. No, gods demand worship. These demand memory. Outside, the sky shimmered faintly with the glow of the Terran fleet departing, their engines leaving streaks of white like scars across the atmosphere. On Earth, Hale stood in the memorial chamber beneath the dome. The lights dim and the air still. Holograms of every Terran operation filled the walls. Names, ships, coordinates, all preserved. You built this place so we'd remember. Myra said quietly, walking beside him. But who's left to forget? Hale looked up at the central inscription carved in black stone. In silence, we guard. His hand brushed the surface. We built it because one day, someone will forget again, he said. And when they do, this place will wake before I do. The Ari's voice broke the silence. Director, multiple transmissions from the council requesting summit. Hale sighed. They want peace now that they know fear. Will you answer? Myra asked. He looked out through the glass at the deep blue water swirling beyond. Not yet. Let them talk to their own silence for a while longer. In the outer colonies, stories spread faster than light. Stories of ships that fell from the sky like angels, of humans who walked through fire to save strangers, of voices that spoke once and then disappeared. The colonies painted the Terran spiral on their walls, not as a symbol of war, but of hope. One child asked his mother, "Will they ever come back?" And she smiled softly, "Only if we forget." In the council chamber, the speaker finally stood before the delegates, his voice weak but honest for the first time in his career. "Perhaps we were wrong," he said. "Perhaps they were never the threat. Perhaps they were the answer we were too proud to accept." And as he spoke, every screen in the chamber flickered once, showing the white spiral of Sol. No words, no message, just the symbol, glowing faintly before fading away. The delegates looked around in silence. The speaker whispered. "They are listening." Back on the Eidolon, Rhea stared at the stars, her reflection pale against the glass. "They're talking again," Voss said, "asking for forgiveness, asking for peace." Rhea didn't look away from the void. "Then they're learning," she said. "Because peace is the only thing worth earning, and the hardest thing to deserve." She closed her eyes. "They think we came back for vengeance, but we came back to remind them what vengeance costs." And so the galaxy held its breath, unsure if humanity would strike again or fade into legend once more. But in every quiet moment between stars, in the static of comms, in the hum of sleeping ships, the same message echoed faintly across the void. When the forgotten cry out, we answer, and somewhere deep within the Sol system, the Ari's sensors pulsed once, registering faint signals from a distant world under attack. Hale's old words echoed through the dome. No world left alone, no cry unheard. And in the silence that followed, the engines began to warm. The galaxy had grown quiet again, too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't bring peace but fear, the kind of quiet that feels like someone holding their breath in the dark, waiting, on Valira Prime. The new speaker stood before the council, her voice trembling as she tried to sound confident. "It has been 5 years since Ashen Reach. There have been no further incidents, Earth remains silent." But no one in the chamber believed her calm tone, because silence had become a warning, a living memory that haunted every world. The colonies that once swore loyalty to the Council now sent their tribute directly to Earth instead. Trade ships traveled through Terran-controlled lanes, and even the Kreth survivors whispered Terran prayers before battle. Yet Earth had not spoken, not demanded, not conquered. It simply watched, and that terrified them more than war ever could. In the deep of the ocean, beneath the calm waves of the Pacific, the Terran command dome still pulsed with quiet light. Director Hale was gone. But his name had become something greater than a man. It was doctrine, the Hale Code, an unspoken rule followed by every Terran officer. Answer only when silence turns to screams. Myra, now commander of Sol Command, stood before the central display, her face older, her eyes colder. She looked at the holographic map of the galaxy, the glowing red points. "Marking unrest, rebellion, corruption, they've learned nothing," she said softly. 5 years, and they're already laughing again." The Ari's tone was unchanged, timeless. Council forces rebuilding, Kreth splinter groups active, several border colonies request Terran protection. She smiled faintly. "Of course they do. When they're safe they forget who saved them." She turned away from the map, her voice low. "Prepare the fleets. Passive observation only. But keep the engines warm." Far from Sol, in the border system of Eularis, a small colony sent a message that would ripple through history. It was not a cry for help, not a political plea. It was a desperate scream. Their skies burned red as a new species, the Dravic horde, descended upon them. No council fleet responded, no allies came, because no one dared, and yet across the void, deep in the Terran network, The signal was heard, the old system stirred. The deep-sea cables thrummed with ancient energy. The AI that once carried Hale's voice reactivated, its tone calm and exact. Human distress signal detected, Ulari's prime, coordinates locked. Myra stood silently before the dark console, her eyes unblinking, no hesitation, no waiting for permission. She said, "Activate Ghost Protocol, full fleet deployment." The AI hesitated, authorization level required. Myra placed her hand on the panel, Director Myra Hale. She said quietly, "I give my father's command, answer with fire." Across the solar system, the sky came alive. On the moon, the old hangars opened once more. On Mars, the dust parted as buried silos rose into the light, and from Earth's orbit, the Terran fleet awakened again. The engines burning white and blue like stars being born. Ships that had slept for years roared back to life, the Eidolon among them, still flawless, still waiting. Admiral Rhea Dalton stood on its bridge, her eyes closing as she felt the hum of its power flow through her veins. "Where are we going?" Voss asked quietly. "To remind them," she said, "that mercy and fire are the same hand." On Ulari's prime, the people looked to the skies as the Dravik fleet blotted out their sun. Their voices rising in panic, "No one will come," someone shouted, "They've forgotten us." And then, like before, the stars changed, the horizon split with light, and hundreds of black ships descended silently through the clouds. No warning, no sound, no declaration. Just fire, precise and deliberate, striking each Dravik vessel in perfect rhythm. From orbit it looked like lightning falling in lines. The sky turned white for only a moment, and when it cleared, the Dravik armada was gone. The people stood in stunned silence as the Terran ships hovered above, engines low, casting shadows over the broken world. And from the largest ship came a transmission. Myra's calm voice carried across every channel. "You are safe now, rebuild, and remember why." Back in the council chamber, panic erupted, delegates shouting, "They've done it again." Another intervention. The speaker's voice cracked. "We can't fight them. We can't even find them until they've already won." Loran, old and frail, rose to his feet, leaning on his cane. "Then maybe you stop trying to fight what protects you," he said softly. "Every time the stars cry out, they come, and every time they leave, you forget. Perhaps that is your punishment. To live knowing they are watching." The chamber fell silent. The speaker whispered, "They don't answer to us." Loran smiled weakly. "No, they answer to something higher, memory." On the Eidolon, Rhea watched Ulari's fade behind them, her heart heavy. "Every time we save them, they forget faster," she said quietly. "Maybe that's why we stopped talking." Voss looked at her. "You think we'll ever stop?" Rhea's eyes reflected the glow of distant stars. "No," she said, "because we remember what it's like to be alone, and we can't let anyone else feel that again, no matter how much they deserve it." In the ocean dome, Myra stood before the great memorial wall, Hale's words carved deep into its black surface. "We are not gods. We are the consequence of forgetting." She touched the name, her voice breaking slightly. "You were right," she whispered. "They'll never understand us, but they'll always need us." Outside the dome, the ocean pulsed with faint light, like the heartbeat of something alive, ancient, eternal. Across the galaxy, in hidden corners, children drew the white spiral of Sol in the dirt. Priests spoke of the silent ones, and merchants told stories of ships that fell like meteors when the innocent cried. And in every story the lesson was the same. Humanity didn't seek power, it answered pain, quietly, completely, without reward. And when the stars grew loud with pride again, that silence would break, because somewhere, beyond the edge of every map, Earth was still listening. And when the galaxy forgot, humanity would remind it once more, with fire. The years passed, but the galaxy never truly forgot the day the fire fell, because silence itself had changed meaning forever. To the council it was no longer peace but a warning, to the colonies it was hope, and to those who remembered, it was the sound of humanity breathing between storms. On Valira Prime the rebuilt council stood smaller, quieter, its halls empty of laughter. The speaker walked the marble corridors lined with memorials for the fallen worlds, but not one of those monuments bore the name of Ashen Reach, because no one dared to speak the name of the place where humanity returned. He stood before the massive window overlooking the twin suns, whispering to his reflection. "They said they came to help, but they never stayed." Loran's last surviving student, Now the High Archivist answered softly. Because they don't belong among us, they belong to the silence that keeps us alive. The speaker turned, frustration edging his voice. How do we live under a shadow that never sleeps? The Archivist looked toward the stars. By remembering why the shadow exists. Across the galaxy, the Terran fleets had scattered like seeds among the stars, their presence invisible but constant, each stationed at the edge of chaos, waiting, listening, protecting, and when the forgotten world sent signals in fear, the fire answered, not in vengeance, but in mercy forged from the memory of pain, on Ulari's Prime, where humanity's last intervention burned away the Dravic horde, the people built temples that faced the stars, their walls carved with the white spiral of Sol. Children grew up beneath the symbol without knowing its origin, only that it meant safety, hope, and the promise that help would come when the sky burned red again. Priests whispered to pilgrims, they are not gods, they are what comes after gods stop listening. Deep beneath Earth's oceans, in the command dome, the light of the central core glowed dimly, like the embers of a fire that never died. Commander Myra Hale stood alone in the memorial chamber, the water pressing heavy against the glass, the holographic stars turning slowly above her, all systems in balance, reported the AI. Council stabilized, outer colonies thriving, no threats detected. She closed her eyes, her voice low. Then the quiet before the next storm begins. Her hand brushed the engraved words on the black wall, we do not conquer, we correct. Her father's creed, her voice softened. You built a machine that listens longer than any heart can beat, and it still answers. Outside, the waves churned above the dome, as if the sea itself knew it protected something sacred beneath. Far away, in an uncharted sector, the Eidolon drifted through the dark, its engines dormant, its crew silent. The only light inside was the slow pulse of its central core. Admiral Rear Dalton sat alone on the bridge, staring at a faded photo of Earth's blue oceans, her voice a whisper. They say we are the monsters of mercy, the ghosts of forgotten wars, but I know what we are. We are the silence between two breaths of creation. Voss, older now, stood beside her. And if they forget again? She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both pride and sorrow. Then we remind them again, and again, until the stars themselves learn to whisper our name. In the Council archives, the new historians debated what to call the age they lived in. Some named it the Era of Fire, others the Silent Dominion, but one quiet scholar wrote in his report. It is neither an age of war nor peace, it is the age of memory, and memory has a name, humanity. The galaxy had rebuilt itself around the myth, trade flowed again, planets bloomed again, but beneath the beauty was unease, because everyone knew the truth. Human eyes were always watching, unseen, unreadable, untouchable, and sometimes, on quiet nights, when the air grew still and the stars flickered strangely, they swore they could hear a faint hum, like the low echo of an engine idling far away, waiting. On Valira, an old woman stood on her balcony, looking at the twin moons. She had been a child during Ashen Reach. She still remembered the day the sky fell in fire, and every night since then, she looked upward and whispered the same words, thank you. And though no one ever answered, sometimes the stars seemed to shimmer brighter, as if someone, somewhere, had heard her. She smiled through tears, you're still listening, aren't you? Back in the dome, Myra walked the long hall lined with names of lost worlds and fallen colonies. Every name carved by hand, every letter filled with light. She paused at the final name, Ashen Reach, and whispered, you were the beginning. The Ari's voice filled the room softly. Incoming signal, encrypted, human distress code. Myra froze, her breath caught, origin. Unknown, the AI replied, beyond mapped space. For a moment she closed her eyes, then opened them again, steady, calm, unshaken, wake them. She said, all of them. Across the solar system, old engines stirred once more. The Eidolon systems flickered to life, Rear's eyes opening as the alert chimed through the ship. What is it? Voss asked. A call, she answered, her voice slow and cold. Someone's crying out again. The stars shifted as the Terran fleet rose from the shadow of planets and moons, engines glowing like dawn breaking through the void, on 1,000 worlds. Sensors registered the faint tremor, and across the galaxy, people stopped and looked up, their hearts remembering what their minds had tried to forget, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy whispered not in fear, but in awe, they're coming, and somewhere beyond the reach of light, The voice of Earth spoke once more, steady and eternal. You called, we heard. And as the Terran fleet vanished into hyperspace, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, alive, heavy with promise. Because everyone knew what it meant. The Guardians of Fire were awake again. And when the stars cried out, humanity would always answer, and their answer would always burn brighter than the dawn.